Hi everyone, welcome back to Winging It. We're in week 39 and if you're new here, don't worry, I will link a playlist at the top of the screen so that you can go back and watch other videos in this series to get an idea of what we do. We're making a quilt this year on a garden theme. We make roughly one block a week, and if a quilt isn't your thing, don't worry, because each of our blocks works perfectly well as a piece of standalone textile art, so there's something here for everybody. Quite unusually for me, we are working on our pink background fabric this week. So I've got a square here that is cut to 20 by 20 centimetres. I've also got a tiny scrap of my pale blue and some of my darker green. It is not the colour it appears on camera. It's a much brighter, more green. It looks very green-blue on here. I don't know why my camera struggles with this colour so much, but it's the same every time I film it. We've also got some of our heat and seal that we used last week. It's a bit like bond web, and I've got some marking tools and my paper scissors and embroidery scissors. I've also got some threads. These are all Anchor brands. So I've got my white, which is 001, my pink, which is 025, my yellow, which is 298, my blue, which is 130, my red, which is 046, and my light green, which is 255. I may not use all of these, but I've just got them handy. I'm also going to use a different kind of thread this week. This is a DMC Light Effects thread. It's a metallic. It is not easy to use, I have to confess. And this is shade E168 if you want to match it up exactly. It is a divisible thread, you can see it fraying apart, but metallic threads are notoriously difficult to handle, and we haven't used any elsewhere on our quilt, so this is just a little feature for this block. I've also got some beads here. I've got some white beads, but I don't think I'm going to use those. I'm more keen to use the silver lined beads, and I've got a couple of faceted beads here. We're not going to use loads. I haven't used them so far because of the risk of them falling off when our quilt is in use, but I thought one or two as a little detail would work quite well for this block. I've also got a template for this week. You can get this at our website. I'll put the address at the bottom of the screen. I'll also link it in the description below. So you can see from our pattern here, we're going to make a watering can. We're going to use our metallic threads and beads for the water, and we're going to do some embroidered details on the watering can. So this costs £1 to download from our website. It's just a nominal charge just to cover some of the costs of making these videos and to help support this channel and keep it going. Please don't feel obliged. If you feel confident sketching out your watering can, then go for it. So I'm going to start in my usual way by just putting some marker points on our backing fabric. So I've got my light box here. I use this just for filming, but if I wasn't filming, I'd be holding this up to a window. And I'm just tracing through so that I've got some positioning for the various aspects of this design. So I'm just drawing around the outside of the watering can and then putting it in my water droplets. And I'm using my aqua pen because we are going to be using some heat and seal, and I don't want it to erase every time I stick something on. I've got some heat and seal here, and I've flipped my pattern, and that's because when we use heat and seal or bonder web, the shape that we're making will be reversed when we put it onto our backing fabric. So I've just flipped my pattern over and traced around the outline. And then this little piece here on the top of the watering can I want separately because I'm going to do this in a different colour. So I'm just sketching around the outside of that opening on the top of the watering can. So now I've got my paper scissors. I'm just going to separate that little piece out, and I want to place my heat and seal glue side down on the back of my fabric. So there's a shiny side and a matte side. The shiny side is the glue, and we want to sketch our pattern so that we're drawing on the paper side. Then we put our heat and seal glue side down on the back of the fabric, and with heat and seal, the instructions say to just hold your iron in place for 2 to 3 seconds and smooth it across the shape that you're transferring, just to press out any air bubbles. So that's what I'm doing there, and I'm going to do the same with this little piece here. I'm going to put that on my light blue fabric, so just a light press there, and then I can let them cool and then cut them out. So I've got my paper scissors here because I'm cutting through paper. I don't want to blunt my embroidery scissors, and I'm just going to cut around the outside edge of that shape. So you'll notice we roughly cut around it before we put it on the fabric, and then when it's on the fabric, that's when you cut precisely around your shape. Now I want this handle to have an opening inside it, so I'm just folding the shape over there and cutting through both layers with my scissors, and then I'm just going to work my way gradually out to the line that I want to cut along, and that should give me a really smooth cut with no sort of barbs and snip marks. So I'm now just going to follow my way around the inside of that handle and cut further than I think I need to get the curve of the handle back where I started. So that's our watering can shape. And I can cut around my little blue piece as well. I'm just cutting slightly inside the line here so that I get a bit of a green border, and then we are going to take off that paper backing, and that will leave the glue attached to the fabric. And I do find that this heat and seal, the glue seems so much more robust. Hopefully the camera's picking it up there. It's a sort of honeycomb arrangement rather than just the filmy mesh that you get with Bondweb, and it did seem last week to give a much more robust bond. I feel like I'm more confident that this will survive being washed and used than Bondweb, and I never thought I'd say that about Bondweb, but I might think that this is better. Only time will tell. But if you are a Bondweb fan, stick with Bondweb. I'm just trying this out just to see how it compares. So now I'm putting my watering can on glue side down, and you can see now we're back the right way round. So because we were working on the back of the fabric, we then flip it over and our shape becomes the right way around. And the instructions for heat and seal say that when we're fusing to our backing fabric, we hold our iron in place for about 10 seconds. So I've just sped this up because you could do without watching me do that for over a minute. So now I've got my little blue piece, I've taken the paper backing off, and I'm just going to nudge that into place just at the top of the watering can, and that's our little opening into where the water is. So that's everything set up, and I've just sketched some guidelines for a rough design. Now I've deliberately left it off the pattern because I think you can just feel free to make up a design that you like and make it very much your own. I'm going to start with some fly stitch. So I've come up with my needle to the left of my guideline, hopped over the guideline and gone down on the right, and then rocked my needle forward so that it comes up inside the loop that I just created. And then I'm going to go along my line and make a little straight stitch, and then rock my needle up to the left again, hop over to the right and rock my needle down the line and up inside that loop. Now if this looks too complicated, I promise you it's a really straightforward stitch, and I will link my stitch guide playlist at the top of the screen where there are detailed instructions for all the stitches that I use in this project. So I'm just stitching along that line there with fly stitch, and then I'm going to finish off and go back in the opposite direction. So I'm creating a sort of symmetrical design. I should say I'm using 2 strands of my light green thread here, so that's true of all this foliage. So now I'm going to put in a back stitch line. So with back stitch, we bring our needle up just in from the end of the line and then take it back down, back at the end of the line. Then we rock forward so that our needle comes up, leaving a gap between the stitch we just made and where we want our new stitch to begin. And then we take our needle back to the end of that first stitch and take our needle back through the fabric, and that's why it's called back stitch, because we keep working back on ourselves. So I've back stitched down to the central line there where the fly stitch is, and now I'm going to just alternate some detached chain stitches. Bring our needle up, we're going to loop our thread around and take our needle back down at the same point, then rock the needle forward and come up inside that loop, and then we hop our needle over the loop that we've just made to put a little anchor stitch in and hold our loop in place. So it's very similar to fly stitch, but rather than having the points at the top of the stitch open, we're going to close them up so it makes a little loop. Then finally I'm going to put some feather stitch leaves in. So we start in the same way as we did with fly stitch, making that little V, but this time instead of putting in a straight stitch, we're going to immediately make another V off to the left, and then we're going to make a little V off to the right again, and then back over to the left. So rather than a V and then a straight line, V and a straight line, this is just a series of interconnected V-shaped stitches that we make by just creating a loop and then using our working thread to hold that loop in place. So I'm going to put in some more foliage and then we'll come back and add some flowers. So that's my foliage. I've made it symmetrical top and bottom and left and right, and I thought we could just put a lacy daisy in the middle but use lots of petals for this one. So because our circle is quite big, each petal is going to be very long and thin rather than rounded. So these are just detached chain stitches, but they're all worked from a central point. So I've made a stitch going south there, and then I've brought my thread back up at the centre, looped it around, I'm going back down at the centre and then rocking forward to the edge of that circle, coming up inside the loop and then putting a little anchor stitch over that loop to hold it in place. Then I come up at the centre again, and this time I'm going to do my east and west stitches. So I'm going to take my needle back down at the centre again, come up at the edge of the circle, hop over that loop to put an anchor stitch in place, and then I can rock back to the centre, and I'm going to do all 4 points of the compass and then put another stitch at north, west, southwest, northeast, southeast as well. So I've got 8 stitches in total there. That was with 2 strands of blue, and I've got 2 strands of white here, and I'm now going to do exactly the same thing again, but make my stitches land in between each of the blue stitches. So you can see me constantly working from the centre there, and it doesn't really matter which order you put your stitches in. You could work round clockwise, anti-clockwise, or hop about like I'm doing. It's absolutely fine. As I say, this is just a suggested design. You could make your watering can look however you like. I was going for a sort of narrow boat folk art look to this watering can. So there's all my petals in place, and I'm just going to put a really chunky French knot at the centre So I've got 2 strands of my yellow thread. I've brought my thread up at the centre and I'm just going to put a French knot. So I've wrapped my needle 4 times there, and then I take it back down at the centre, holding onto that working thread until the last minute to put the centre on my flower. So I'll put in another couple of little flowers either side, which you'll see in a minute, and now I've got a line just down from the top of the watering can that I'm just back stitching along in 2 strands of yellow thread. So I'm going to do a line of back stitch at the top of the watering can and at the bottom. So hopefully you can see a bit better there how to do a back stitch. So you come forward so that there's a gap, and then work back to your previous stitch. Then rock forward again so that there's a gap, and then go back to your previous stitch. So I'm working all the way along there with my yellow. I'm going to do the same again at the bottom. Then I've got 2 strands of white thread, and I decided I was going to do a whipped back stitch here. So I brought my white thread up at the end, and to do a whipped back stitch I'm just going to slide my needle underneath each of the back stitches, always passing through in the same direction. So I'm going from above the line to below the line, right to left as it appears on camera. And then at the end I'm just going to take my needle back down through the fabric and tie it off at the back, and I did exactly the same at the top there. So now I've brought in some of my dark green, which I didn't have at the beginning. It's Anchor 683. I've got 2 strands, and I thought it would be nice to give the watering can shape a bit of an outline. So I'm just going to running stitch all the way around the shape, and I'm going to put in the sort of joins where the spout of the watering can joins onto the body. I'm just going to put a line across that, and the same with the handle as well. And I'm also going to stitch around that top surface of the watering can as well. So just working my way around there with a really simple running stitch. And this will sort of harmonise this block with other blocks where we've outlined the shapes with running stitch. So I've done that, and I stitched around the blue of the watering can as well. And I've also put some French knots in for the holes in the spout of the watering can. So now we turn our attention to our metallic thread. Now this is often helped by some beeswax. I didn't have any handy, so you'll see the threads have a mind of their own, but the key to using metallic threads is to work with really short lengths. So I've only got about 25 centimetres here. It probably was still too long. Probably go 15 to 20 centimetres. I promise you it might seem like it's too short and you're going to be changing threads all the time, but it doesn't hold up well to being dragged through fabric. And so actually, if you try using a longer thread, all that will happen is that you just waste your thread, because it will start to break apart and fray, it'll break, and it will constantly be tangled up. Once you've separated these threads, they don't like staying together, so they can be really temperamental. But I've just running stitched down each of the lines of water there in my metallic thread, really simple, and just knotted each line at the end. So now I'm putting my beads on. I've got 2 strands of white thread. I've brought my needle up through the fabric, and I've just threaded a bead onto the needle and taken the needle back down through the fabric. And I'm actually going to repeat that process. So I've come up on the left of the bead and threaded through and gone back down on the right of the bead again, just so that there are 2 stitches holding it. And because this quilt is going to be used, I'm actually going to tie off the thread after every bead. And again, that might seem laborious, but because this is going to be used, if you don't do this, if one bead falls off and the thread breaks, all the beads are going to come off, and it's actually going to be quite tricky to put beads back on again once it's quilted and all put together. So belt and braces, better safe than sorry. I'm going to put 2 stitches in each bead and then knot off on the back, just to make sure that everything is as secure as it can be. So I'm just going to scatter these beads. These I think are 3mm silver lined clear beads. So if you're looking for something similar, I think there'll be something like a size 10 bead, and you're looking for a silver lined version. And that's it. That's our block for this week. So we've got our watering can with our folk art floral design, and I've got my shimmery thread and my little sparkly dots of beads that create almost like water droplets. And I have to say, in spite of the pink background, I love this block. I don't know what it is about this one. Maybe it's beads. If you've been watching my Winging It videos for a while, you'll know that as far as I'm concerned, nothing is finished until it's got some beads on it. Can't wait to see your versions. Please do share them at hashtag FSH23quilt. And if you've enjoyed watching this video, please do hit that like button. It means the world to us and it helps other people find our videos too. If you've enjoyed this block and want a similar project, I'll link some videos over here. And if you want to see more of our content, just click on our logo down here. It makes it really easy for you to subscribe, and if you turn on notifications, you'll never miss an upload. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great week making your watering can block, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!